The clumsy cougar who scared off the white-tailed deer is not the most cruel. Ibabo, the northern goshawk, now a seasoned huntress who knew how to swoop down on her prey no matter where it chose to hide, is not the most ferocious. Abisi, the fierce coyote, is not the most ruthless. No, the most fearsome killer is Winter. Sako the porcupine sends Abisi a painful memento. And a young female moose dances in the snow while a dumbfounded male looks on. The wolves Wumit and Enap are quarreling over frozen skeletons. Their growls blend with the whistling wind. In this season, to the east of Mount Michener and Brazo lie frozen lakes and a massive shroud, the legendary prairies. Here, a ray of sunshine sometimes stirs a small prairie dog community out of its winter lethargy. Prairie dogs, close cousins of the squirrel, are rodents who spend most of the winter in burrows that are so extensive they're like underground cities. When there is danger, the sentinels sound the alarm with little squeals that vary in intonation according to the predator. A dozen distinct calls have been identified depending on which animal is approaching. Today, Abisi the coyote is the one prowling on the carpet of snow, and it is the sentinel herself who whets his appetite. Overly confident, Abisi has let his prey escape into one of the many entrances of the communal burrow. While Abisi waits for his fugitive to reappear, another victim materializes out of nowhere. This time, Abisi doesn't intend to be cheated. This is his last opportunity. The sentinel does not resist his hunter as a worthy opponent would. The prairie dog has one last card to play. He pretends he is dead until the clenched jaw loosens. But that's not enough on the Great Prairie. Intelligence and courage aren't enough without luck on your side. Sometimes Winter tries to fool the group of elk who bask in the pale light of a deceptive sun. Winter can even mislead the streams and rivers by giving them a stronger current, and offers all living things the mirage of newfound warmth. These days, one might think all of the land is going to melt, dissolve, liquefy. As if the milder weather wasn't enough to disturb the internal clock of the wintering black bear, a squawking bird makes him believe spring has arrived. This is worthy of investigation. Before the winter, the bear used his curved and powerful claws to make a den right in the ground, which he then covered with dead leaves, moss, and twigs. Next, he lay down and fell asleep in his bed, oblivious to the snow that covered him. But he wasn't hibernating. While his heart rate slowed, his body temperature did not drop proportionally, the difference between overwintering and true hibernation. During this phase, the bear lives solely on the fat accumulated over the summer gathered from the berries that hung heavy on the bushes. Since then, he has not eaten or defecated. The whims of winter have fooled him before. A brief, warm spell is enough to make the black bear believe that spring has arrived miraculously early. Then, with his paw and muzzle, he checks the consistency of the snow, and like a cautious explorer, he ventures forward to determine its thickness. It is now clear that winter has not laid down its arms. It was a false hope, an illusion, a betrayal. The snow remains, as well as the icy ground underneath. Best to return to his den, where the snow insulates his body heat, and only emerge from his cocoon when spring has at last truly arrived. Near the Rocky Mountains, winter is merciless. The cold returns just as quickly as it departed, bringing with it blizzards that chill flesh and blood. Ibabo, a northern goshawk, is a huntress by day, a diurnal raptor closely related to the sparrowhawk. She was equipped by nature to seize partridges, crows, or magpies in full flight. Her short, rounded wings and long tail have made her a virtuoso flyer who can reach lightning speeds. But in the dead of winter, Ibabo attacks everything that flies, climbs trees, or scampers on the ground. Birds, squirrels, vole mice, or hares. Winter has turned the hare's brown coat to white. White on white, snow on snow, Ibabo's sharp vision will have to adapt to this pale world where her prey blends in with the horizon. Each finds his own way to cope with the severity of winter. Rather than waste energy by running, Socks, the female cougar, waits for her prey to pass under the bough where she crouches in ambush. From there, she will leap onto the animal, sink her fangs into it, and topple it with one swift, violent movement that will break its neck. This is what Socks recently did when she killed a young doe weakened by the cold, providing her with a week's worth of sustenance. Cervids are the cougar's favorite prey, which explains the close demographic relationship between the two species. Before she can feast, she must skin the doe and rip off its furry, leathery hide. Ibabo, for her part, managed to capture her prey, proving that mimicry gives those who want to survive some protection, but no guarantee. Different tools, but a similar technique. By pecking and biting, two predators prepare their meals. When satiated, Socks will cover her prey with enough snow so that greedy carrion eaters will not see it nor, more importantly, smell it. And she will return tomorrow to consume enough meat to resist winter one more day. The valley is blanketed in white, but at least the snow does not immediately turn to ice. The caribou have understood that, and when winter arrives, they come down from the mountains into the valleys. Their hooves, shaped like snowshoes, allow them to walk in the snow just as they can gallop in the autumn mud. They push aside the snow with the tip of their hooves, and underneath they sometimes find lichen or moss, which make up their seasonal menu. Searching for food uses up a lot of energy, and so one must occasionally rest. For example, on a frozen lake, where one can lie down in a hollow in the snow, and where the whiteness of the surroundings will quickly expose any predators. Several weeks ago, a male moose sporting ridged antlers joined a female and her daughter. He is still young and extremely vigorous, which no doubt explains why his antlers haven't fallen off yet. The three animals now form a clan that calmly braves the cold. Their diet is limited to branches and bark, and they avoid moving around too much so as not to deplete their stores of energy. The possibilities for sexual activity entice the male, even though the rutting season ended several months ago and the female calf is still too young to mate. In this season, the snow has covered all the grasses, sedge, clover, lupins, and sage on which the bighorn sheep were recently feasting. None are easily found. The omnipresent blanket of snow that must be constantly scraped, sometimes to no avail. For only frozen, dried tufts of grass, lichen, and sometimes a little moss remain here and there. The bighorn sheep become gold diggers, and whoever covets the find of another will be brutally rebuffed. A hillside where it's easier to dig up a few roots can provide a windfall. This year's young have already been weaned, but they are reluctant to give up their mother's rich, creamy milk, the milk which passes on to them the abundance of a milder season. The young started winter under optimal conditions. Now they must supplement their nutritional stores with food that is available. And so they imitate their elders and dig, dig, dig. In the great Canadian West, the arrival of winter is reminiscent of the era known as the Wisconsin glaciation, which ended only 11,000 years ago. The ice may have receded, but the deadly cold remains. Every day, Socks, the female cougar, returns to her larder, where she keeps the carcass of a doe killed 2 days ago. Suddenly, the calls of visitors can be heard in the distance. The cougar knows what the howling means. Wolves are nearby. She isn't afraid of them, but doesn't much like to be bothered. When Womit and Enap arrive, only a few unappetizing scraps remain on the carcass. Socks has left. Tomorrow she will set another ambush that will provide her with nourishment for the upcoming days. The cougar, like all the animals of the Rockies in winter, considers her efforts carefully. This is the only way to survive in the bitter cold. A useless quarrel wouldn't be worth the loss of calories. What a cougar leaves behind is still good enough for wolves. Womit eats while his mate Enap watches. She will only approach when given permission by the dominant male. Among wolves, the head of the pack serves himself first. The order in which they join the meal accurately reflects the hierarchical structure of the pack. And when the pack consists of only one couple, the female must wait her turn or, now and then, snatch a bone, giblet, tendon, or a scrap of hide to tide her over. The male has had his fill. It's finally the female's turn to alleviate her hunger. Perhaps he wants to mark the site with his scent in order to cover up the smell of the cougar named Socks. By leaving traces of his scent, he can for a while claim this part of the forest as his territory. Womit rolls in the snow that is still stained with the blood of the doe. For wolves, nothing is more important than ritual behavior. Only after this has been accomplished can he return to his meal. Gradually, the layer of snow in the valleys becomes thinner. Winter is not over, but in the coming weeks, it will become less cruel, less deadly. The bears begin to leave their dens. During the overwintering period, some of their vital functions have slowed down. In particular, they stopped excreting waste for several weeks. The first outing offers the opportunity to release some of the accumulated fluids and solid waste from their bodies. When they come out of the wintering period, black bears discover a new world. It's as if they had been gone for too long. They must reacquaint themselves with their surroundings, check the thickness of the snow, sniff the odors in the vicinity. If they still seem massive, it's because of the thickness of their fur. They have actually lost 30% of their weight. The black bear generally remains solitary as an adult, but when he is younger, he enjoys playing with his companions. The winter didn't use up all his vitality. The game is a way of reawakening his sluggish facilities, of bringing back to life his whole physical apparatus. Here and there, the earth re-emerges, a brown mosaic still spotted with white. At last, he can sniff it, touch it, feel it come back to life. However, he knows from experience that the foul season sometimes makes false exits. And so, he hesitates, dawdles, and sometimes gives in to the temptation to return one last time to the den lined with moss and twigs, the cozy cocoon where for months he held out against the tyranny of winter. The Rocky Mountains form a collection of highly diverse climatic zones. Each valley, each rock face, each region has its own weather system. Humidity, precipitation, temperature, atmospheric pressure all depend on microclimates that do not follow any general rules. At times, it seems like the spring thaw is near, but it's only an illusion. Winter doesn't give up so easily. It resists for a very long time. At the end of winter, ghostly creatures are sometimes seen wandering in the underbrush. Who could have thought that this animal, ravaged by vermin, belongs to the most noble, the most venerable species on the continent? Tens of thousands of ticks are now lodged in his coat. Such is the fate of the moose at the end of the season. Of all the cervids, they are the parasite's most preferred host. The presence of the mother nearby is no help to a young infested moose. She could fight off a wolf, but how can she deal with these invisible enemies? The inopportune guests drain his blood and weaken the animal. By scratching himself on trees, he will lose his fur and destroy his thermal protection. His overall resistance will slowly decline. Soon, other parasites will join the ticks, especially the hydatad, a small tapeworm which invades the digestive system. There may also be the meninges nematode, which will gradually destroy the brain membranes and spinal cord. The young moose will surely not survive. He will soon encounter a cougar or a grizzly not inclined to spare a weakling, beaten even before going into battle. The layer of ice that cloaked the lakes and rivers is slowly thinning. It breaks apart, no longer resisting the beaks of teals or ducks, and turns to water. Upstream, the glaciers have begun to sweat. In a few days, water will flood everywhere, and the sight of rivers resuming their tumultuous course could make one forget that the Rocky Mountain region is a dry place, cut off from the humid air masses of the Pacific by the alignment of its rocky faces. The largest terrestrial carnivore on the North American continent has come out of his winter lethargy. The grizzly has left his den in search of some food. Contrary to legend, he is more omnivore than carnivore. He will accept anything that his claws can find. First, it's the carcass of a bison he comes across. Several others have already helped themselves throughout the winter. There is hardly any meat on its bones. A pathetic find. It's too early to hope to find the first sulla roots in the muddy ground, considered one of the best energizing foods, rich in carbohydrates and minerals. He must therefore be content with exploring the available resources. A hollow, half-decomposed tree, which falls apart easily under his claws, often serves as a hideout for fat, delicious larvae.
away and abandons its rule over the mountains and the prairies. The ice breaks up, the snow disappears. The time has finally come to live again. Springtime has once again settled in on the prairies. A few weeks have passed, and old rags seem to hang from the bodies of the bison, strips of winter fleece beginning to shred. In the crowd of powerful herbivores walks a brown-headed cowbird, a little bird who eats insects and other invertebrates that proliferate around the herd. The brown-headed cowbird never strays far from his massive companions, who, each time they kick up a tuft of grass, disperse a few seeds on which the bird feasts. A female brown-headed cowbird, characterized by her maroon feathers, suddenly attracts the attention of the one who's gathering the food. He is enticed away from his moving buffet. It's already mating season, and he would gladly present a courting display if the coveted female weren't so close to another male who seems to be favored. A few confusing maneuvers ensue: intimidation, bribery, seduction. The stakes suddenly change because the large bison is moving away. The brown-headed cowbirds follow their bison wherever they roam. Love is forgotten, for now the stomach is more important than the heart. In springtime, the waters of the mountains are slowly liberated from the grip of the cold. Massive quantities of water are frozen in the Columbia ice field, the largest ice field south of Alaska. It covers 325 square kilometers and includes the Athabasca Glacier, which in turn feeds the basin of the Saskatchewan River. When only a small amount of these reserves melts,
The whole world from Sanwapta to Takakaw Falls seems like one giant waterfall. In a small valley also transformed by springtime, a doe, whom we'll call Kenawa, prepares to give birth. Kenawa is a white-tailed deer. She has survived the winter. She made it through like many of her kind, thinner, exhausted, depleted. And she barely has time to recover any of her strength before giving birth. Kenawa doesn't want to leave behind any trace of the amniotic fluid or any part of the placenta, since their odor would attract predators to her and especially her fawn. Kenawa has carried her fawn for more than 200 days. At birth, he weighs between 2 and 4 kilos. Does normally have their young between the end of March and the end of August. This is the beginning of spring. Kenawa is among the first of the herd to give birth. The mother begins to clean her fawn. Every square centimeter of his body will be licked to eliminate the odor of the placenta, to stimulate the skin's nerve endings, and to massage each of the newborn's muscles. For the two wolves called Wamit and Enap, the period of scarcity during which they had to be content with carrion, sickly prey, even plants, is over. They hunt with more enthusiasm. And although they may not eat now, they can devour 10 kilos of meat in a single day. In March, Wamit and Enap mated. Since then, Enap has dug a deep den in the loose soil. Womit the male doesn't like his companion to remain in the den for too long. He needs her for hunting. Together they form the core of a pack, and their hunting strategy is based upon group coordination. At this point, they must not slacken their efforts to find food, since Enap must provide for 2 newborn cubs. The 2 cubs, curled up together, are 5 days old. They are called Yaha and Lasti, the words that mean wolf and black in the Cree language. At birth, each one weighed almost 400 grams. Until now, they have been like 2 little inert blind balls of flesh. Today, Yaha opens his eyes for the first time in his life. Normally, a female wolf gives birth to larger litters of 5 to 7 cubs, but they are sometimes less fertile. Moreover, the newborn mortality rate is quite high. Many of the young do not survive their first weeks. Now that he has a family, it's even more important for Womit to establish his territory. He accomplishes this mainly by rolling on the ground to deposit the scent of his bodily secretions, especially from the 2 glands at the base of his neck. Enap returns to the den regularly to see if any predators have entered. But after the reassured mother has left, little Lasti faces other dangers. Lasti has indigestion, which can be relieved by vomiting. But there's always the chance the young animal will choke. Just born, Ikoan, the son of Kenawa, is already dry, revealing his white spotted coat. He would like to get up and set off on an adventure, but it is not yet time for that. A brother will soon join him. Together, they will share the world. White-tailed deer usually give birth to a litter of 2 fawns, but sometimes there may be as many as 3 or 4 young. It is now time for Ikoan and his twin brother Nitsimi to make an enormous effort to stand up on legs that have never been extended, legs that are extremely slim and fragile. But before even helping them to accomplish this feat, Kenawa persists in removing any trace of the placental residue.
Ikoan, the firstborn, has already reached the nourishing teat. Nitsimi works hard to catch up. Kenowa stands up to stimulate and encourage the one who is finding the task more difficult. Since his mother seems to be abandoning him in favor of his brother Nitsimi, Ikoan now finds himself more on his own. It will take only a few hours for the two fawns to stand up, to learn to suckle, and to memorize forever the scent of their mother. The only training that matters in these first few hours. In the first week, they will remain fragile and vulnerable. Their only advantage being the good fortune of being virtually odorless and therefore escaping the attention of predators. The full moon waited for the birth of Kenowa's young. She will watch over their first hours of life. Because here it is said that the Great Spirit inhabits the stars, and that everything is one: rock and water, air and fire, life and breath.